It is such an honor and privilege to take all of you around our museum and our sanctuary. This is what you see now, the third oldest synagogue in America, the oldest in the South, the first Ashkenazic, the second oldest house of worship in Georgia. And we are so privileged not only to be a full-time synagogue that is growing, but also a full-time museum. Of course, this was all before the pandemic, and hopefully it will start up soon. So during a regular year, we get around 11,000+ people who come in for official tours, and then probably 4,000 or 5,000 other people come in for other programs, for services, and for tours that are through friends and neighbors. So it is a real privilege for us to be able to continue the tours virtually, especially because we don't do very many of them otherwise, except we're just about to open again pretty soon. So we'll be doing them. So if you're ever in Savannah, come on down and let us know. We have 45 docents that volunteer their time to take people around 5 days a week. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the museum a little bit. We're going to look at our sanctuary a little bit. And at the end, I'll answer some questions. And again, thank you for joining us. Now, first of all, we're in the museum. Jill, you'll show a little bit of it to everybody. This is our award-winning museum. Somehow in 2014 or 15, we were nominated and named the #1 tourist destination in all of Georgia by Parade Magazine. We're not sure how we did that, but it was pretty impressive. This is, again, our museum. In 1733, James Oglethorpe founded the colony known as Georgia. It was in February. In July of that same year, a boatload of Jews, 41 to be specific, landed on these shores and were welcomed and became full members of the community. We think it's the first time a Jewish group was ever given full rights in America. And so that makes Georgia, we believe, the only one of the 13 colonies in which Jews have always had full rights. So how did they get full rights when they came here? And that's an interesting story. Well, first of all, you have to go to Portugal. In Portugal, a very well-known man who was a doctor to none other than the Grand Inquisitor himself, also attended to the king, also had a nephew who was the physician to Catherine the Great. He was caught being a crypto-Jew. And because he was such a valuable asset, he was not killed and he was put under house arrest. One day he had a party with some friends over. They met this really nice English captain who just happened to have a boat in the dock. And they went on to visit the boat to go on a 3-hour tour, and they went to England. So these Portuguese Jews ended up in England, didn't have very much money or anything else. And so they didn't quite fit in. So the oldest synagogue in England, Bevis Marks, sponsored them on a trip to America. So these Portuguese Jews plus 2 German families arrived on July 11, 1733, right in the middle of a pandemic. We believe it could have been yellow fever, it could have been something else that says a swamp area. And of course, on the boat was this very prominent doctor who came in and treated the community and is credited with saving this first community of Georgia. That's one of the reasons they were given full rights. Another reason has to do with the actual colony's rule book. What were the rules? What were the rules of the charter and the laws of the charter? Well, the only people not allowed officially into Georgia were Catholics, as they were called Papists, because Spain was controlling Florida and England controlled South Carolina, and Savannah was going to be a protectorate of Charleston. Lawyers were not allowed. Alcohol was not allowed. So bar owners and no slave owners were allowed. So this was kind of a utopian vision by James Oglethorpe. So he welcomed these Jews on, gave them full rights. He gave them the same thing everybody else had: a house, a garden, and also a land to farm. Plus, they were required to serve in the militia, which is an interesting note because Jews were generally not allowed to bear arms or participate in the military. And here they were required since they were full citizens. So they came here, became full citizens, became a very high percentage of the community. At this point, this would become one of the largest Jewish communities in the country. 4 years later, a group of German Jews sponsored by that same synagogue in England would come here And so you'd had the German Jews, you had the Sephardic Jews who were based in Portugal. So you had Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews together, and it made Savannah the largest Jewish community in America for about a 5 to 10 year period. So we definitely held number one for that short amount of time. Now, what's interesting is if you read the letters from the non-Jews at the time, they are always wondering, why are those Jews always arguing over what they can eat? And we know now that they had Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazic Jews here. In 1742, there was a war between Spain and England. It was called the War of Jenkins' Ear. So all the Portuguese Jews left. Some of them went to Philadelphia and founded the fourth synagogue in America, Mickve, Israel. Why did the Portuguese Jews leave? Well, they knew that if Spain captured Savannah, that the Inquisition would have rights over this area, and they had all illegally fled the Inquisition, so they could have been subject to torture and actually the death sentence for both them and their families. So that's why they left. So we became a purely Ashkenazic synagogue. We were the only Ashkenazic synagogue in America from 1733 to probably sometime in the 1790s, where a second one opened up in Philadelphia, because most of the Jews who came over in the 18th and 17th century were Sephardic. Now, when they arrived here in 1733, the Jews brought with them this. This is the first Torah scroll to come to America. And over there, the first circumcision kit to come to America. We still have both. Now, you can see that there's been a few pieces added, but that is the first circumcision kit brought to America. And we'll go back and look at the Torah scroll. But while we're going back on this side, the German Jews in 1737 brought this Torah from Bevis Marks, the second Torah to come to America. And what you have to understand is, we believe Bevis Marks sent their oldest, least valuable Torah scrolls, because when a Torah scroll becomes pasul, or unreadable, you bury it. But since there were no other Torah scrolls, the colonists kept these scrolls, which were written sometime in the middle of the 15th century. And so they are now the oldest Torah scrolls in America. And we believe two of the oldest Torah scrolls in the world. In fact, we believe there's only one Torah scroll in the entire world that can be proven to be older than these two. There's a couple others from the same age, but only one in Italy that is much older. It's made on deer skin, and whoever wrote it, we don't know who, but it was probably written in Portugal, Spain, or North Africa. They were very adept and were very financially solid because they're very well written. These two 15th century scrolls are written in a better way than our 5 19th century scrolls. Now, if you go through it, you will see a little damage from water. We don't know if it was from a trip over. A few years ago in 2015, we actually wrote our own Torah scroll, or had one written. And so for that brief moment in time, we had the oldest and the newest Torah scrolls in America. And so what we're going to do is look at a little bit of our history as we
Rabbi Haas,
yes.
What parsha is that scroll open to? And is there a reason why?
What happened was, I'll have to look up, we just moved it. We had somebody come in and check it. So I don't know where they were just rolling it. So we can figure out right now.
We had just changed it, the parsha.
Yeah. What happened was, we had the woman who comes and attends to these scrolls came in and was moving it around. We had it at, I think
10 Commandments.
We had it. Yeah, we had it before at, this may be A, I think. No, that'd be in Deuteronomy. No, I'll have to see.
Didn't mean to stump you.
We haven't set it to the one we're going to do it. Oh, it's Vayakel. All right. So now what's interesting is we use this Torah scroll every year from 1733 to about 5 years ago for at least our anniversary service on July 11th. And then we did have a little bit of a tear in it, so we had to stop using this. We were told not to use anymore. So 5 years ago, we decided since we're going to stop using this Torah scroll, we're going to stop using the circumcision kit as well. So we just stopped that a few years ago. That was a joke, by the way, just in case you're wondering. If you actually come to this tour in person, that joke usually kills. Over here, we have a really interesting map. Now, if you come to Savannah, you will see this map all over the place. Savannah is the oldest city in America with the original outline of the city still being used. But this is not the 1733 map. This is the 1734 map that just shows where the Jews were living. And you'll see each Jewish family was given a house, a garden, and land just like everybody else. So you'll look, they're the exact same houses. And if you come to Savannah, you'll see that the city is still built in this way, downtown, perpendicular and parallel with these squares in the middle sections. Now, the cemetery for the Jews originally was built right here, but as the city expanded, it expanded over all of the cemeteries. That's why Savannah is considered the most haunted city in America, because they never moved the people, they just built over it. So if you come to Savannah, there is a marker right where the old cemetery used to be. And if you come here on the other side, it has the names of most of the people buried. We don't have the names of all of them. But later on, we did create 2 cemeteries, one for the public and one for just a family, so that anyone in the area, whether you were a member of this community or not, if you were Jewish and you just happened to be traveling to Savannah and died here, they had a place to bury you free of charge. And we still are we still have representatives who run those 2 cemeteries, although they're both closed. Over here, we have a picture of Mordechai Shephel. He is one of the 2 first Europeans born in Georgia. He was born in 1734. He's from one of the 2 German families that came. That's the Shephel family and the Minus family. They're still members of that family in our congregation. There's still Minuses in Georgia and in Savannah, although they're no longer Jewish, but we still maintain contact because of their heritage. So Mordechai Shephel was the highest ranking Jew in the military during the American Revolution. He was an on-field general. He was captured during the Battle of Savannah with his son, Shephel. And yes, there was a tradition in the South, or with Jews in the South, of naming your son with your last name as well. Also naming your child after yourself. So we have a lot of people who are juniors, second and thirds to this day. Mordechai Shephel was known as that rabble-rousing Jew in Georgia, referred to that by the governor himself. He selected our delegate to the Second Continental Congress, where they signed the Declaration of Independence. We also had another woman who was probably the most prominent Jew in the 18th century, because it was Abigail Minus, probably the most prominent Jewish woman in America during that time. As she came over, her husband died. But instead of marrying somebody and then giving the property to that person, she somehow ended up getting permission, and she ran her husband's businesses. She started a very prominent bar. She and Mordechai Shephel gave an incredible amount of money to the revolution, kind of like Chaim Solomon. And so it's really interesting that we still have members of his family still in our congregation today. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, how could she own a bar if alcohol was not allowed in Savannah? Well, that rule was changed very early on, because ships would not stop here because the sailors did not want to come to a place where there wasn't alcohol. So that forced the city open up to alcohol. And unfortunately, because of the competition we have with Charleston and other cities, slave owning was then permitted later on as well, unfortunately. And then years later, Catholics were allowed as well. But as you can see, it's really incredible that we have some wonderful pieces of heritage. If we consider these 2 Torah scrolls our babies, and they're both beyond compare and very valuable, we also have this. This is the first letter from a president of the United States to a congregation. That's from George Washington. We sent him a congratulatory notes when he became president, and he sent that to us. He also sent letters to the other 5 continental congregations of the time, but ours was the first. The congregations were Sheriff Israel in New York. That's the first one. then Truro in Rhode Island, then us, then Philadelphia, Mickve, Israel, then Charleston, and then finally Richmond. Richmond was actually founded after the Revolution, but before George Washington was inaugurated. We also have letters from Thomas Jefferson and James Madison congratulating us on our first building. A letter from Robert E. Lee to one of our congregates that owned a pharmacy or an apothecary, and actually the family is still in our congregation. And then over here, we have a letter from President Andrew Johnson, who was a president after Lincoln. We actually have more presidential letters than any other congregation. We have all of them from the 21st century, although we haven't got one from President Biden yet, and many from the 20th century. Over here, we have an interesting little sidebar. This is Uriah Phillips Levy. We put this up here because he's the Commodore and the highest ranking Jew in the military for much of the 19th century, served in the War of 1812 and the Civil War. He is the grandson of Samuel Nunez, who was that doctor who saved our city, our colony. So even though he never lived here, we put this up because he's the man who saved Monticello. Jefferson was broke, he died, the place was going to be leveled, his family was going to sell the property, and Uriah Phillips Levy actually bought it and renovated, and that's why Monticello is still here today. So if you go there, you will see Thomas Jefferson's not actually buried there. Uriah Phillips Levy is not either. He's buried at Annapolis, but Rachel Phillips Levy, his mother, is buried there. Actually, he's, I believe, I don't know if he's at Annapolis or one of the other national cemeteries. What we have here is a Haggadah with notes from the Shephel family from the 18th century. As we know, it's been a tradition to put family notes in Bibles or Haggadot. And this one talks a little bit about Abigail minus Shephel. So over here we have an old ketubah, because since the New World was the Wild West, there were no rabbis in America till the 1840s. We call those the good old days. So if you were someone who wanted to get married, you probably didn't have a ketubah made, but there were certain individuals who were a little bit more religious, like Mordechai Shephel. And so they did find ways to create ketubahs. We have here our congregational confirmation chain. We've been putting chains on links since 1935, although we've had confirmation here since 1880. This is something we just added because Miss Daisy, her family is from our congregation, so she still has members here. So we thought that'd be nice to put that up there. Her aunt is actually here, actually officiated at the wedding of her great-great-grandniece 2 years ago. And if you know anything about Savannah, one of the most famous things, of course, is we are the founding city of the Girl Scouts. So when Julia Gordon Lowe founded the Girl Scouts, she chose 5 women to be the first Girl Scout leaders, and 3 of them were from our congregation. So 60% of the first Girl Scout leaders were Jewish, including Mildred Guggenheimer, who was a descendant of Mordechai Shephel, and whose daughter just died about 3 years ago at 101, and she may have been the oldest Girl Scout in America. But what we also have over here is a really interesting piece of history. If you come here in our archives, that is the first receipt for Girl Scout cookies from Gottlieb's Kosher Bakery. They won the contest with oatmeal and chocolate chip cookies. And that family's still in the community, although they're members of the Orthodox synagogue, because in Savannah we have an Orthodox synagogue, a conservative synagogue, and a Reform synagogue, a federation, a JCC, although they call it the JEA. So we have a little bit of everything.
Talk about the Communal Ring.
I've been asked by our wonderful videographer, Jill, to talk about the ring. That's a little interesting piece of history. When I arrived here, I didn't realize these things exist. That's a communal wedding ring or communal engagement ring. If you could not afford a ring for your wedding, you could use this one. And it's very similar to me when I married my wife. The jeweler had accidentally put little diamonds on the wedding ring, And so we borrowed somebody else's ring for the actual ceremony. So again, that's kind of what we do. And over here, finally, we like to show not only what we've done in the past, but we're a growing synagogue through the years. And we do an incredible amount of interfaith work in the city. And so we decided to have an exhibition just on our interfaith work. What time is it, Jill? So we maybe want to go to the sanctuary.
12:23.
12:23. All right, so we'll come over here. I'll show you one or two more things. This is a minute book from the 19th and 18th century. Although we're the third synagogue to be started in America, we're actually the first synagogue that was started intentionally. In other words, the synagogue that was started in New York was an accident. They were Recife, the Jews have been kicked out of Recife, they were attacked by pirates, and they limped into New Amsterdam and just stayed there. And the same thing happened in Toro, that it just kind of happenstance. Here, they actually moved here to start a synagogue. So we had notes going all the way back to the day they got off the boat in 1733, which would be some of the oldest official Jewish documents in the country. This is the seal when we became incorporated as a congregation in the United States of America. The Shephel family still has the document of incorporation into the British Empire by sign with the seal of King George II. So we have a lot of other historical things in our community, and we have an archival committee that does an incredible amount of work because we have people coming to do research. We have a documentary coming out on our congregation and the Georgia Jews. We're going to be part of an episode of PBS. So there's always people coming in doing research and trying to study the history of Southern Jewish America. This is the list of our presidential letters, not the list. There are probably a lot more. Unfortunately, we did not keep control of our records very well until probably the 1970s. So a lot of the stuff is out there on eBay or around, and we buy some of the things every once in a while if we can. And we're hopefully going to be getting a letter from President Biden soon. It's interesting because when I arrived here 9 years ago, we did not have a letter from President Obama. And he was actually about to run, he was running for re-election. So he did win, so we did get one from him. And we got one, of course, from the last two presidents. And one another, although they're connected, but they are two different buildings. This is our sanctuary, which was completed in 1878. It's the last neo-Gothic synagogue left in America. We know of only one other, and that's in Prague. Now, people ask, why did we build something in a neo-Gothic style? The answer is because traditionally you build a sanctuary, a synagogue, in the way everybody else is building their buildings. There's no particular way to build one. So next door, First Presbyterian was building their church, neo-Gothic style. The Catholics were building their cathedral, neo-Gothic style. And so we did the same thing. There were a lot of other synagogues actually built in this style, except we're the only one left. So come on in. I'm going to go turn on the lights, and you'll be able to see what a beautiful place this is. So again, completed in 1878, using the same architect as the cathedral, which is a little bit bigger, but if you go in there, you'll see the similarities. As you see up there, we have an organ that is not original, as we had a fire in 1927 that ruined the organ. But a lot of what we have here is still original. And even so, the organ is almost 100 years old. We're actually the first synagogue in America to use an organ, possibly even the first synagogue in the world. We credit that to this German synagogue, obviously, but there is a strong possibility we had used it before that, but we don't have any proof of that. When you come in here, you'll see these full marble pillars. They're actually metal because we had someone who was a metal worker in our congregation at the time. And as you can see or hear, the acoustics are amazing. So we do a lot of concerts and a lot of programs in here. We have 3 original windows that are still part of the building up there, stained glass. One of them actually has the priestly benediction, which we're asked about all the time because they're saying, why are Spock's hands up there? If you see in the middle one, it has the, and so it's a good thing that I'm here to give information, because whenever they ask me, why do you have Spock's hands up there? I always tell them because all Jews are Star Trek fans. I want to make sure non-Jews understand a lot about Jewish culture. It's important. We also have a lot of other stained glass windows. They've been all added through the years for one reason or another. And this place is even the more incredible because it was built, of course, after the Civil War. It was built much larger than what was needed. So they really had forethought. And they had an incredible group of dedicated individuals. And I'm always telling our presidents that they're never as dedicated as the president before, because the first president of the congregation who oversaw the building of this synagogue died of yellow fever because it was a yellow fever epidemic. The second president died of yellow fever. The third president died of yellow fever. So it wasn't until the fourth president was able to be the one to officially be here for this. So dedication, unbelievably so, as you can imagine, because during yellow fever epidemics, you usually send the family out. Now, what you'll see also is we have in there, we have 6 scrolls. 5 of them are from the 19th century, as I mentioned, and one of them is from recent days. And what we do is we do open it so we show people, because we have so many tours. So this is the one we use. This is our Holocaust tourist, or our memorial tour. And we have the others. So basically this one's from a few years ago. The other 5 are written in around the middle of the 19th century. Now, do you want me to continue, or is it time for questions? It's up to you guys.
I think you can show us a little bit more.
Okay, cool. Come on down.
You have 19% on your battery.
Okay. I plugged it in. My battery's still holding on. So what you can see here is these pews are still original. And as we go farther back, you'll see windows have been added all over the place. In fact, some of our congregants today are still descendant of people who added the windows. We've had an incredible relationship with the community in Savannah because we were here since the very beginning, literally. Again, we're the second house of worship to be established in the entire colony of the state. Almost every organization that formed had at least one Jew in the as an original person on the formation committee. So there's been very little anti-Semitism. There's been
Rabbi, I'm sorry. We're only getting every few words. You're freezing.
Tell me if you can hear me now.
Are you getting it now?
Better.
That's a shame, because what I just said a moment ago was probably the most profound thing that has ever been said, and would have transformed everyone listening, their lives, and made them better people. But unfortunately, we didn't catch it. So I'll go back to what I was talking about. We've had a really great series of relationships with the non-Jews in this community. There's been very little anti-Semitism. Almost every organization has had a Jew who helped found it. And so it's really been a strong connection. And even to this day, we have great relationships with everyone. And that stems from the fact, obviously, we've been here since the very beginning. And it's been really a wonderful community relationship. Now, we have 3 synagogues in this community as well, and a Jewish community center and a federation. So a lot of people don't realize that Jews are in the South, but Jews have been in the South since before 1733. We're the oldest congregation in the South, but Jews have been moving here a long time. Charleston would become the largest Jewish community in America for about 100 years or so, starting in the 1740s, going all the way to the 1840s. So Jews have always been here. Today, we have about 4,500 Jews in the Savannah area. Plus, just north of us, across the border into South Carolina, there are a lot of Jews in Hilton Head, but also in a Sun City there. So there's a nice number of Jews in this area. And Savannah, of course, is growing, which makes it interesting that the Jewish population is also growing here, which surprises a lot of people. We have a lot of people come here who are going back and forth from New York, New Jersey to Florida, but we also have people come here from around the world. And it's really a great feeling to come to Savannah. Before the pandemic, the city was getting like 14 or 15 million people a year. And we're only about 140,000 in the city itself. So it's an incredible place to live. So much going on. And pretty much every person who's an elected official, every person in the community who's a leader, works with the Jewish congregations and has a relationship with us. And we have a great relationship with the conservative congregation, with the Orthodox congregation, and with the JCC, of course, we call the JEA, the Jewish Education Alliance, and with our federation. So we invite people to come here anytime they like. There's a plethora of Jewish things to see. And we have a map that can show everything that you'd like to see. You can see our museum, see this. We also have a couple exhibitions. We work with other groups. We've had exhibitions with the country of Ireland, for instance, things with other places in the South. We work in tandem with the archives in Cincinnati. Our archives are both in Cincinnati and here. The Savannah archives through the Federation are now in Atlanta at that's called the Bremen Museum, which is really an incredible place as well. Now, any other questions, by the way?
We have a couple of questions. What's the size of the congregation? How many members do you have?
Our congregation is about 410 families. So we, over the last 10 years, we've probably gone up from around 280 to 410. So we've actually been a growing congregation, which is nice. We are actually not even the largest congregation. We believe the Orthodox congregation in town is larger than us. And that's really an interesting story that we've had an Orthodox congregation here that is doing so well in the South. We originally were a traditional congregation. The idea of Orthodox Reform, of course, comes in. Those words actually come in after our synagogue was founded. Those words came in the 19th century. We started as a traditional Orthodox synagogue. Then we became an Orthodox synagogue with mixed seating. And then when the conservative synagogue was founded, we became the Reformed synagogue and the conservative synagogue, and then the other Orthodox synagogue, which was more traditional, stayed as the Orthodox synagogue.
We do have a couple of people on the call who've actually been there in person. So, and they're saying wonderful things. Davida and Cheryl have both been there in person. So you get aces for that. Excuse me. What kind of modernization have you had to do to the synagogue? Because obviously there wasn't electricity and amplifying systems, security, things like that.
Well, that's a good question because we've gone through a couple renovations. Just a couple of years ago, we actually set about to renovate the sanctuary, which hadn't had a complete renovation in a while. And we found the wiring was still the original wiring that had been put in like 70 or 80 years ago. So we were very fortunate because it could have burned down because we had not checked it. So now we have updated wiring. The synagogue is very safe in terms of the doors are huge and strong. So we feel very comfortable here. We've had to deal with the same thing everybody else has done. Roofing. When they built the other building we were just in was built in 2013. They did some minor renovations in here. This used to be just metal. Now you can see this little full marble. So it's an old building, so we continually have to do the upkeep, which of course is always difficult. And it has been difficult for us the last year or two, as it has been for other synagogues. But the biggest issue for us has been during the pandemic that a lot of our revenue comes from our museum. And since we didn't have a museum for a year and a half and no tours, so we've had to overcome that. But we're doing pretty well considering, I think, as our mini synagogues.
Ruth is asking if you could talk about your school, the classes that you have, what kind of programs you do.
I'd love to. We have a Sunday school with the conservative synagogue, Agudat Achim, and we've had it for about 27 years together. We were the first conservative and reformed synagogues to share a Sunday school. So Sunday school, again, when we go back in person, we have on our third floor of our new building. And then on Sundays, and then they do Hebrew school on Wednesdays at the conservative synagogue. We have the youth group. We go through the federation. We used to have a youth group and we used to have a young adult group, but the federation brought people in to run those groups. So it goes through them. So we use BBYO and we have the young adult group through them. We have an incredible amount of program right now. We have our own YouTube site. You can go and see a lot of our programs. Wide variety of social action. We just helped found a social justice organization along with 25 other houses of worship. We do a social action program called Backpack Buddies, in which every kid in a school who needs food on the weekend receives it. And our congregation was instrumental in sending this program throughout the area. So now every single school in this county, Chatham County, has a house of worship, making sure that all kids who need food on the weekends are receiving them. We do a lot of programs in terms of history programs, obviously, because we're a historic synagogue. We do a lot of musical programs because the acoustics are so good here. We bring in speakers. So we do a lot of different programming, just depending on what's needed. We have study sessions every week. Right now, virtually, I do a study session every Wednesday. We have an education person who does on every Tuesday and every Friday. I was doing an interview every Tuesday for a while. We have a Friday night 5 p.m. story where I read story time to little kids. I dress in a costume. That one's on Facebook. It's a private Facebook group. We do a service virtually every Friday night, and of course, virtual service every Saturday morning. That will be changing because not this week, but next week, we're going back to in-house services on Saturday morning, although they'll always, everything we do from now on will be streamed. As with everybody else, our technological skill has really improved greatly over the last year and a half. So now everything we do is virtual, even if it is live.
And we found the same thing with JCC Chicago plans to continue that hybrid programming, because we've reached out to, we've reached people that we may not have reached in the past. So what is your favorite spot or place in the building?
My favorite spot is probably my study, because the building was built before I got here, and the previous rabbi wanted, I think, a big office, so I got a big one. So I got this giant study, which is great. But truthfully, my favorite part is the sanctuary. The sanctuary is just spectacular. It's so beautiful. We have a wonderful cantorial soloist who sings and has a gorgeous voice. And so, and whenever somebody comes here, maybe a cantor, cantorial soloist, or just a singer, they come in here and they just love to sing because the acoustics are amazing. And it's really incredible. Now, a lot of people think, wow, you were so fortunate you came to this wonderful historic congregation, which is true. But the reason I wanted this position wasn't because of the history, which is great. It's because the community is fantastic. It's a very dedicated community, a mixture of people whose families have been here for 350 years, or 300 years or 200 years, with a lot of people who have moved here in the last years from the Northeast and the Midwest. We have this mixture of Southern tradition and Northern tradition, and it really makes a wonderful place to visit because everybody is very accepting of the differences we have with each other. So it makes it a very vibrant place, and the history is just one aspect of that vibrance.
And ask the audience if there are any other questions. You can unmute yourself, raise your hand first if your camera is on. Last call for questions.
And the good news is, if you come here in person and take a tour with me, it's going to be completely different because I basically make up everything as I go along. So just come on down. Like, you can come out and pay for 2 tours, and both will be completely different as well.
Susan's asking if there's kosher food available in Savannah.
That's a great question. There are no kosher restaurants. Obviously, we're too small. the Conservative Synagogue, the Orthodox Synagogue, and the Jewish Community Center both have kosher kitchens. There is a senior home that is run by the Rebbitzin of the Rabbi of the Orthodox Synagogue, which is also a kosher kitchen, and there is a kosher cater in town. There was a kosher yogurt place. Unfortunately, it closed during the pandemic, and there is a kosher ice cream place that may have closed as well. I'm not sure.
We lost our kosher yogurt place as well, sadly. So.
And then actually, they're friends of ours, and actually, that family are descendants from the Miss Daisy family.
I did drop in the chat box a book about Uriah Levy, Saving Monticello. It's a great book. So if anyone's looking for something good to read, I enjoyed it. And
we actually had the author here, and it's really an incredible story about him saving it, his nephew saving it, a whole anti-Semitism that led to it being sold to the United States of America. It's really
yeah, it's a fascinating story. Fascinating story. Cheryl wants to know if you still sell the Shalom Y'all t-shirts.
Oh yes, that's our biggest seller, Shalom Y'all t-shirts. We also have a bunch of other Shalom Y'all stuff, and we're looking forward to opening. We're hoping to open our doors to tourists at the latest July. So we'll look forward to. But you can also just order those online.
Yeah, gift shops.
Ruth, can you unmute and ask your question, because I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to know if you did any programming with SCAD.
You're shutting down.
Looks like we're shutting down, guys. Oops.
I think we've run out of battery.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay.
If you can hear me, we just ran out.
Yeah. Ruth was asking about doing anything with SCAD, SCAD.
that's the art school. It's an art university there. When we visited Savannah, there were a number of students who were waiters and so on back before COVID. And I was just wondering if they did any programming with them, because they seemed like a good group of folks.
I think we may have lost the rabbi.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we are going to the American Museum, the Jewish Museum of the American Southwest. So please visit our website, jccchicago.org. We've got film coming up this week, and we will be visiting some more Frank Lloyd Wright sites in June. So thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day and take care.